visitor. The call of Mr. Morton's upscale second-hand store ticked its final chime of the evening, echoing through the dimly lit showroom. Outside, a violent thunderstorm raged, the rain battering against the large bay windows with a relentless fury. Flickers of lightning illuminated the store's elegant but now empty displays, casting eerie shadows across the room. Mr. Midst of closing up, methodically checking his inventory and securing the glass cabinets. He had just finished counting the day's takings when the store's antique bell tinkled, heralding an unexpected visitor. Mr. Morton glanced up, frowning in confusion. The store was officially closed, and his usual late-night customers were few and far between. And through the torrential downpour stepped a figure who seemed to emerge from the very storm itself. Lydia Nightshade, with her raven black coat flowing like liquid silk and her wide-brimmed hat shadowing her face, entered with an unsettling grace. The storm seemed to follow her, as if she were a dark deity of tempestuous. Mr. Morton blissfully mesmerized by the sight of her. Lydia's coat was adorned with subtle glistening patterns that hinted at a deeper, sinister beauty. Her presence was both regal and unnerving, and she walked with a deliberate, measured pace, each step echoing in the stillness of the store. The thunder outside seemed to intensify, as if resonating with her arrival. Lydia's voice was a melodic murmur, smooth and velvety, carrying a faint hint of a foreign accent. "I trust I am not too late?" Mr. Morton, his professional demeanor slipping into a cautious curiosity. "We're closed, madam. Perhaps you could return tomorrow." A smile Lydia that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I assure you, Mr. Morton, my visit is quite urgent. I come with a special consigning request." She paused, letting the words linger in the air. "I have a piece I believe would be most desirable for your establishment." She extended her hand, and from within the folds of her coat, she produced a purse that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. The purse was crafted from the finest black leather, and its surface was embossed with intricate patterns that seemed to shift subtly with the light. It exuded an aura of both opulence and mystery. Mr. Morton's listened in genuine interest. The purse was exquisite, and its craftsmanship was beyond anything he'd seen in his years of curating fine second-hand items. "That is certainly a beautiful piece, madam. May I ask what makes it so special?" Lydia to the display counter, placing the purse gently upon it with a fluid, practiced motion. "It is not merely its appearance, Mr. Morton. The true elegance lies in the experience it offers. I assure you, it will add a touch of unparalleled sophistication to your collection." With a delicate flick of her fingers, the purse opened to reveal a deep, shadowy interior that seemed to extend infinitely, as if defying the very laws of space. The sight was mesmerizing, but Mr. Morton could only see a glimpse into the void within. "Lydia, this," continued with a dramatic flair, "is capable of holding treasures of all kinds, and should it find a place among your collection, I am certain it will attract considerable interest." Mr. was piqued. "I must admit, the craftsmanship is extraordinary, but I have to know more about its history and any peculiarities it might possess." With a hint of something inscrutable. "It is a piece with a storied past, Mr. Morton. One might say it holds within it the essence of elegance itself. As for peculiarities, one might discover them with time. But, I assure you, its allure is undeniable." With a ping glance around the store, Lydia picked up her cane and prepared to leave. "I trust you will consider my offer. I believe you will find this purse a most intriguing addition to your collection." As Lydia glided toward the door, the storm outside seemed to ebb slightly, as if in response to her departure. The bell tinkled once more as she exited, leaving behind an unsettling calm. The purse, still resting on the counter. It was indeed a piece of remarkable beauty, and the enigmatic Lydia Nightshade had left him with more questions than answers. The storm raged on outside, and with a deep breath, Mr. Morton reached out to examine the purse more closely, feeling a strange and inexplicable pull. Began to break through the clouds. Mr. Morton found himself drawn to the purse, unable to shake the feeling that it was no ordinary item but a gateway to something far more profound and dark. Chapter 2. The Price of Desires. The first light of dawn filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting a pale glow over Mr. Morton's store. The storm had subsided, leaving behind a damp, quiet aftermath. The elegant second-hand store, usually a haven of rare and antique treasures, now seemed to hold a new and unsettling intrigue. His eyes remained fixed on the purse, its dark beauty having captivated him entirely. It was as though the purse whispered promises of something beyond mere wealth, something that stirred a deep, almost primal desire within him. The more he studied it, the stronger the pull became, compelling him to acquire it at any cost. Behind the counter, his thoughts racing. The purse's elegance was undeniable, but it was more than that. It was an enigma, a masterpiece of dark allure. With a resolute decision, Mr. Morton stopped abruptly, and, with a determined glint in his eye, approached the door to the store. Outside, a nightshade was about to disappear into the misty dawn, when Mr. Morton hurried to catch up with her. He found her standing beside a sleek black carriage, its design as sophisticated and darkly enchanting as its owner. She turned, her expression a mix of curiosity and amusement, as he reached her. Madam, Mr. Morton's voice was urgent, almost pleading. I must insist. I am prepared to make an offer for the purse. I want it for my store. Its beauty is unparalleled, and I can't bear the thought of it being anywhere but here. Lydia, with a knowing smile. Is that so, Mr. Morton? It is rare indeed to encounter such enthusiasm. What are you willing to offer for such a unique piece? Mr. Morton, only for a moment, weighing the significance of his words. I am prepared to offer a sum far beyond what you might expect. 10 times the purse's worth in cash, and a promise of special treatment for anything else you might consign in the future. But I must know your price. What will it take to make this purse mine? Lydia, with a dark amusement, her fingers idly tracing the edge of her cane. Oh, Mr. Morton, you are most eager. But you see, the purse's value is not so easily quantified in mere currency. Its true worth lies in the desires it fulfills and the power it bestows. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Such a valuable item demands a price that transcends the material. And in your case, it requires something more personal. Brow furrowed. What do you mean by personal? His with an unsettling intensity. The price for the purse is not merely financial. It involves a deeper sacrifice, one that resonates with your very soul. The more valuable the object, the greater the sacrifice required. Before could respond, Lydia's gloved hand reached into the void of the purse and withdrew a small, ornate contract, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow. She handed it to him with a slow, deliberate gesture. Here, Lydia said softly. It details the terms of the transaction and the nature of the price. I advise you to read it carefully, for once you commit, there is no turning back. Mr. Morton's missed the contract. The parchment felt cool to the touch, and the text seemed to shift and writhe as he read it, detailing the ominous and vague nature of the price. The language was filled with legalistic and arcane terms, but one line stood out clearly. The pricing of personal significance, to be defined by the desires of the one who seeks the purse. A storm of emotions visible on his face. What exactly do you mean by something of personal significance? And Lydia, revealing a hint of malice. That, Mr. Morton, is for you to discover. The purse will reveal its true price when you make your wish. But beware, the more grandiose the wish, the greater the price. It is the nature of such things. He trembled as he held the contract, his mind racing with the implications. The promise of owning such a treasure was irresistible, but the unknown cost was daunting. He glanced at Lydia, who awaited his decision with an air of detached interest. Mr. Morton made his choice. Very well, Madam Nightshade, I will accept the terms. The purse shall be mine. In the contract, a deep, malevolent voice echoed from the purse, resonating with an evil tone. Pride reverberate through the room, sending a shiver down Mr. Morton's spine. Lydia's eyes sparkled with a dark satisfaction as she watched him. Her tone laced with dark pleasure. I shall leave you to the contract's details. I trust you will find the price to be most enlightening. She gave a graceful nod and turned toward her carriage, disappearing into the early morning mist. The sound of the carriage's wheels soon faded, leaving Mr. Morton alone with the purse and the contract. As a shiver of apprehension ran down his spine. He placed the contract on the counter beside the purse, his mind swirling with anticipation and dread. He knew that the allure of the purse was just the beginning of a much darker journey, one that would test his resolve and reveal the true cost of his desire. A broke through the illuminating the store with a cold, unfeeling clarity. Mr. Morton's fingers traced the ornate designs on the purse, his heart pounding with the knowledge that he had crossed a threshold from which there was no easy return. Chapter 3. The unveiling. The grand auction room was a spectacle of opulence. Chandelier crystals sparkled with the light of 1,000 candles, and the walls were adorned with rich tapestries and gilded moldings. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the anticipation of wealthy patrons and collectors eager to witness the event of the year. In the center of the room, under a dramatic spotlight, the purse lay in a glass display case, its dark elegance captivating every gaze. Meticulously preparing for the auction, his excitement barely contained as he oversaw the final touches. The purse, now a centerpiece of the evening, had attracted considerable attention. Invitations to the event had gone out to the elite, and the room was filled with murmurs of intrigue and speculation. As Mr. Morton, clad in his finest tailored suit, paced back and forth behind the auctioneer's podium. He had spent weeks planning this moment, curating every detail to ensure the purse would fetch the highest possible price. His eyes were fixed on the display case, where the purse seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy. A distinguished figure in a dark suit took his place at the podium, ready to begin. The crowd settled into their seats, their eyes drawn to the glittering prize. Deep breath, feeling the weight of the purse's allure. He had been confident in his preparations, but a creeping unease tugged at him. It was as though the purse had a will of its own, and he could sense an undercurrent of power that unsettled him. Struck, and the bidding began. The initial bids were cautious, as attendees gauged the room and considered the purse's value. Mr. Morton watched intently, his heart racing with anticipation. As something peculiar started to happen. The room seemed to grow warmer, the air thick with an electric charge. The purse, encased in its glass box, began to emit a faint, pulsating glow that grew more intense with each passing moment. A voice echoed in Mr. Morton's mind, almost as if speaking directly to his thoughts. "You want more? You want to see them fight for me? Let me show you." Mr. widened in shock. He shook his head, trying to clear the disorienting fog that had settled over him. But as he looked back at the purse, he noticed that its glow was no longer confined to the glass case. It was now spilling into the room, weaving through the crowd like tendrils of dark energy. To seep into the atmosphere, subtly influencing the bids, the figures on the bidding cards began to escalate beyond reason, driven by an unseen force. The once competitive but measured bids had transformed into frenzied, almost irrational offers. Mr. regained control, stepping forward and attempting to reassure the bidders. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice unsteady, "please, let's keep the bidding fair and orderly." But the bidding continued to spiral out of control, with amounts reaching astronomical figures. Mr. Morton's attempts to intervene were met with growing hostility from the bidders, who seemed increasingly fixated on the purse, driven by an insatiable desire. Struck repeatedly, but the chaos in the room only intensified. The crowd was no longer simply bidding, they were captivated, almost possessed by the allure of the purse. The atmosphere was charged with an almost tangible sense of greed and desperation. Morton felt a chilling realization. The purse was no longer just an object of desire, it was actively manipulating the bidding process. Its dark power was feeding on the crowd's greed, amplifying their desires and pushing them beyond their limits. In attempt to regain control, Mr. Morton reached for the purse's display case. As his hand touched the glass, a jolt of energy surged through him, sending a wave of pain and disorientation. He staggered back, gasping for breath, as the purse's glow grew even more intense. Fever pitch, with one final astronomical offer coming from the shadows at the back of the room, a bid so high it seemed almost otherworldly. The auctioneer, his expression a mix of awe and terror, declared the bid as the winning offer. Unsighted the silence, as the purse was sold to the highest bidder, the winner's identity obscured by the darkness at the back of the room. The glow from the purse began to fade, and the room's temperature returned to normal. Pale and trembling collapsed onto a nearby chair. He looked at the purse with a mix of horror and disbelief. The power of the purse had overwhelmed him, and he had become an unwilling conduit for its dark influence. Moments of confusion and fear filled the air. Mr. Morton's reputation was in tatters, and he was left to confront the aftermath of a bidding process that had spiraled out of his control. Mr. Morton knew one thing for certain: the purse's power was far greater than he had ever imagined, and its influence had only just begun to reveal itself. Chapter 4. The new mistress. The gala at the Rothschild estate was the social event of the year, a glittering affair held in the grand ballroom of one of the most opulent homes in the city. The estate, with its sprawling gardens and neoclassical architecture, had been transformed into a palace of luxury and excess. Crystal chandeliers cast their light upon the elegantly dressed guests, who mingled and sipped champagne amidst a backdrop of classical music. The elite, the quiet purse was the talk of the evening. Its sale had been shrouded in mystery, and the whispers about the mysterious bidder who had secured the item were buzzing through the halls. Everyone wanted to know who had outbid them all for the enigmatic artifact. Under a spotlight of attention, stood Isabella Rothschild, the young debutante who had claimed the purse. Dressed in a breathtaking gown of deep emerald green, her beauty was both radiant and imposing. The gown, with its intricate embroidery and sweeping train, seemed to shimmer with a life of its own, complementing her commanding presence. Highest bidder at her bid so extravagant that it had stunned even the most seasoned collectors. Her father, a prominent figure in the business world, had used his influence to secure the purse, a gesture to mark his daughter's entrance into society. The purse was now hers, and Isabella was eager to showcase her new acquisition. Grandeur of the estate and the elegance of its owner, Isabella stood beside a lavishly decorated display table where the purse was prominently featured. It was placed atop a velvet cushion, its dark allure now framed by the opulence of the surroundings. The purse seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible glow, its previous owner's influence lingering in its aura. The mixture of pride and anticipation as she prepared to unveil the purse to her guests. She had studied its exquisite craftsmanship and its mysterious allure, but she was eager to experience the full extent of its reputed power. Lady, Isabella announced, her voice clear and commanding, "I am honored to present to you the latest addition to my collection. This purse, which has been the center of such intrigue, is now a part of my home." A chorus of admiration and curiosity. Guests gathered around the display, their eyes drawn to the purse's intricate designs and the allure of its dark, shimmering surface. Conversations buzzed with speculation about the purse's origins and the secrets it might hold. And to interact with the purse, their perspectives and desires revealed the growing covetousness each felt. Eleanor Harrington, society matron, a towering figure in social circles, was the first to approach the display. Her eyes, sharp as daggers, fixated on the purse. "Isabella, darling," she said with feigned nonchalance, "this purse is simply divine. The craftsmanship is unparalleled. I must admit, I've never seen anything quite like it." Against her glass case, and a hint of envy colored her tone. "You know, my collection of antiques could use such a conversation piece. If you ever tire of it, do keep me in mind." Her gaze lingered, her lips curling into a smile that barely concealed her desire to possess the purse. 2. Montgomery, art dealer. Known for his discerning eye for rare artifacts, moved in next. His gaze was analytical, but there was a hunger in his eyes. "Isabella, this is an extraordinary find," he said, his voice low and filled with awe. "The intricate details, the quality, it's as if it's from another era, another realm." Peering intently at his, "Imagine the prestige of owning such a piece. It could elevate any collection to new heights. I'd be interested in discussing its provenance and possibly adding it to my gallery's exclusive collection." His offer was sincere, but his gaze revealed a deep-seated yearning. Victoria Lancaster, jewelry designer. A renowned jewelry designer, was next to approach. Her eyes widened with admiration as she examined the purse. "Isabella, the beauty of this purse is breathtaking," she exclaimed. "The way it captures light, the design, it's like a piece of art. I'd love to explore how it might inspire my next collection." Case, her voice tinged with envy. "If ever you decide to part with it or even just showcase it in a private viewing, I would be thrilled to discuss a collaboration. Its elegance could inspire something truly spectacular." Her longing was evident in the way she admired the purse's every detail. 4. Alexander Sinclair, financial tycoon. A financial tycoon known for his shrewd investments, approached with a calculating gaze. "Isabella, this purse is not just a luxury, it's a statement. The kind of statement that could enhance one's status immensely," he said, noting the envious glances of other guests. "In this world, owning something so unique is a mark of true power. I'm curious, what sort of opportunities does this purse present? I'd be willing to discuss potential investments or exchanges if it interests you." His eyes glinted with the cold light of ambition. Green, socialite and influencer. Sophia, popular socialite and influencer, was the final guest to approach the display. Her excitement was palpable as she took out her phone to snap pictures. "This purse is so beyond fabulous," she said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "It's going to look amazing on my social media. Everyone will be talking about it." Her eyes sparkling with a mix of admiration and envy. "You're going to be the talk of the town. If you ever want to do a feature or a private event, count me in. This purse deserves all the attention it can get." Her words were enthusiastic, but beneath the surface, there was a clear desire to possess the allure of the purse herself. As the guests' covetousness grew, their admiration turning into a collective desire for the purse. Each perspective added a layer to the purse's mystique, amplifying its allure and the intensity of the evening's excitement. The more they spoke about the purse, the more their longing became palpable, transforming the gala into a battleground of envy and desire. Isabella, now alone with the purse, watched as the final guests departed. The once festive atmosphere had taken on an eerie calm, and the purse's glow seemed to pulse with a quiet, malevolent satisfaction. The guests' desires had fueled the purse's power, and Isabella was left to grapple with the reality of owning such a captivating and enigmatic artifact. Shimmering as an object, Isabella felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The purse had fulfilled its promise of intrigue and luxury, but as she contemplated the growing darkness of its influence, she realized that the true journey with the purse had only just begun. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Act. The Rothschild estate had transformed from an evening of elegant revelry into a scene of chaos and confusion. The gala, which had been a display of grandeur and opulence, was now marred by the mysterious disappearance of the purse. The atmosphere, once filled with laughter and champagne toasts, was now thick with tension and suspicion. Amidst the clamor of the post-midnight festivities, a gasp of shock echoed through the ballroom as Isabella Rothschild realized that the centerpiece of the evening, the coveted purse, had vanished from its display. The room fell into a stunned silence, the guests' expressions shifting from confusion to concern. Ashen, as she scanned the room. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice cracking with distress. Her father, normally composed, looked equally flustered. The once pristine ballroom was now a flurry of frantic searches and whispered accusations. Being an honored guest at the event, was quick to assert his displeasure. "This is a disaster, Isabella," he said, his voice edged with frustration. "I'm afraid you'll have to pay for the purse. Its loss is your responsibility. We had a deal." "I didn't steal it," she protested, but Mr. Morden's anger was unyielding. "You must resolve this immediately," he insisted, "or I'll be forced to take legal action." The situation escalated as the police were called to the scene. The clamor of the party had given way to a tense investigation. Isabella's guests, now sober and anxious, were questioned as the police arrived. Among them was Constable Lydia Nightshade, who had disguised herself as a police officer for this very purpose. Her uniform, though professionally tailored, seemed slightly out of place given her usual theatrical and demonic presence. The disguise did little to mask her sharp, determined gaze as she surveyed the scene. "Bella," her voice calm and authoritative. "Miss Rothschild, I'm Constable Nightshade. I understand that a valuable item has been stolen. I'm here to investigate and ensure its recovery. Still shaken, felt a glimmer of hope at the sight of the constable. Thank you, constable. The purse, it was taken right from the display. I have no idea who could have done this. Lydia, methodically questioning the guests and examining the scene. The crowd, though cooperative, was filled with uncertainty. Guests who had been so eager to admire the purse now seemed defensive, their once jovial demeanor replaced with apprehension. Who had been closely scrutinized, appeared nervous but maintained an air of composure. I assure you, constable, I was simply admiring the purse, he said with a veneer of politeness. I would never. As Lydia's keen eyes caught a glint of something unusual, a small, almost imperceptible scratch on the display case's glass. It was a clue, but one that did not immediately lead to any clear suspect. Lydia's thoughts raced, trying to piece together the scant evidence. The investigation led to no definitive conclusions. The guests, while appearing to cooperate, were adept at concealing their true feelings. The purse had vanished without a trace, and Lydia's investigation seemed to be hitting dead ends. As the police's inability to solve the case only deepened the gloom, Lydia, maintaining her professional facade, reassured Isabella. We'll continue the investigation, she said, her voice low and resolute. Rest assured, we'll do everything we can to recover the purse. Stress, palpable, nodded in silent agreement. Thank you, constable. I just hope we can find it. Their excitement, now replaced with unease, began to leave the estate, their departure marked by whispers of the theft and speculation about the thief's identity. The grandeur of the evening had been overshadowed by the purse's mysterious disappearance. Trickled out and the estate returned to a somber quiet. Lydia took a moment to reflect on the night's events. The purse was still at large, and its owner's identity was known only to herself. The theft had not only disrupted the evening but had also heightened the purse's enigmatic allure. Lydia, to recover the purse, was just beginning. With a mixture of determination and satisfaction, she prepared to leave the Rothschild estate. The investigation had not yielded immediate results, but the hunt for the purse, and the dark secrets it harbored, was far from over. Cool night air, Lydia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The purse, now a symbol of both luxury and malevolence, had been stolen from its new owner, but it was still bound to her by its very nature. The night may have ended in confusion, but for Lydia Nightshade, it marked the start of a relentless pursuit to reclaim the object that rightfully belonged to her. 6. The price of vanity. The moon hung low and full, casting a pale light across the city streets as Julian Montgomery returned to his opulent townhouse. The once grand estate, now subdued under the night sky, bore witness to the aftermath of the gala's chaos. Julian's heart raced with exhilaration as he slipped through the ornate front doors, the stolen purse clutched tightly under his arm. Dimly lit his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. The grandeur of his home, with its rich furnishings and priceless art, was a fitting backdrop for the treasure he now possessed. He could barely contain his excitement as he ascended the grand staircase, the purse a heavy but coveted weight in his hands. Julian carefully placed the purse upon his mahogany desk, its dark, shimmering surface catching the faint light from a nearby lamp. He closed the door behind him and turned to admire the prize he had so cunningly acquired. The room, filled with the soft glow of antique lamps and the fragrance of aged leather, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Dark danced in the purse's surface as he stood before it, a smile of triumph on his lips. At last, he murmured, his voice dripping with satisfaction. The coveted purse is mine. How perfectly it complements my collection. A piece of unparalleled beauty and mystery. His eyes purse as if it were a rare jewel. You know, Purse, he continued, his tone taking on a self-congratulatory air, the evening's events only underscore my genius. To secure you, to outwit those amateurs at the auction, it was a display of sheer brilliance. Designed the purse, his admiration evident. Think of it, he went on, his voice growing more fervent, a piece of such value, such power. It's not just an object of luxury, it's a statement, a symbol of my unrivaled taste and acumen. It's now a part of my world, a testament to my superiority. Taking a deep breath, and gazed at his reflection in the purse's dark surface. The others will rue the day they underestimated me. They'll speak of this purse with awe, and they'll know that it is I who holds it. I will be celebrated for my discerning eye, for my ability to acquire what others could only dream of. Julian reached a crescendo as he continued to extol his own virtues. His voice echoed through the room, a mix of self-praise and grandeur. This is the crowning achievement of my career. No one else could have claimed such a prize. I am, after all, the finest connoisseur, the master of this domain. Grew more extravagant, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the room. The purse, its dark surface shimmering ominously, seemed to respond to Julian's self-aggrandizement. The very air around them grew heavier, charged with an unseen energy. Pierced by a deep rumble from the purse itself. The sound was otherworldly, a dark resonance that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It was a single word, uttered with a chilling authority. Study, the reverberating with a malevolent undertone. Julian froze, his self-satisfied grin faltering as the room fell into an eerie silence. The purse seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its response a stark contrast to Julian's grandiose declarations. Chest as he stared at the purse, his reflection now twisted and distorted by its surface. A shiver ran down his spine as the weight of the purse's response settled over him. The room, once a haven of luxury, now felt oppressive and foreboding. His confidence shaken, he took a step back, his eyes never leaving the purse. What did you say?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The grandeur of the moment had given way to a chilling realization. The purse was not just a passive object, but an entity with its own voice, its own presence. The sanctuary of self-importance now felt like a prison of doubt and fear. Julian's earlier excitement was replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. The purse, with its dark, rumbling voice, had made its presence known, and Julian was left to grapple with the unsettling implications of its response. As Julian remained in his study, the purse's single word echoing in his mind. The luxurious veneer of his home seemed to peel away, revealing a deeper, darker truth. The purse, now firmly in his possession, had begun to reveal its true nature, and Julian's vanity had set the stage for a far more unsettling encounter than he had ever anticipated. Triumph now felt hollow, overshadowed by the purse's dark voice and the ominous sense that he was not alone in his victory. The night was far from over, and Julian's new prize had already begun to exert its power in ways he had not expected. Chapter 7. The tangled threads of fate. The days following the gala were filled with a mix of unease and anticipation. Julian Montgomery, still reeling from the eerie encounter with the purse, found himself increasingly obsessed with its power and the enigmatic word it had spoken. Despite the lingering unease, he paraded the purse among his inner circle, flaunting it as a symbol of his superiority. Julian hosted an intimate gathering in his opulent study, eager to showcase the purse once more. His guests were a mix of wealthy associates and influential figures, each invited to witness the prize that had caused such a stir at the Rothschild Gala. The atmosphere was one of genteel conversation and indulgence, with the purse displayed prominently on a velvet pedestal at the center of the room. This was Rupert Harris, a brash and arrogant financier known for his tendency to provoke. As the afternoon wore on, Rupert, emboldened by a few glasses of fine wine, began to taunt Julian about the purse's origins and the recent scandal surrounding its theft. Already frayed from the persistent whisper of envy, was not in the best shape. Rupert's mocking tone and cutting remarks began to chip away at his composure. The more Rupert goaded him, the more Julian's irritation mounted. Rupert sneered, leaning close to Julian. "It's a trinket that's been stolen, a symbol of greed and deception. I wonder what it really does, besides flaunt your egotism." With anger, his hands clenching into fists. "How dare you?" he snapped, his voice rising. "This purse is a masterpiece. It's a mark of my superior taste and achievement, not a joke for your amusement." The palpable as Julian's frustration reached its peak. He stormed away from the pedestal, his anger blinding him to everything but Rupert's incessant taunts. In his fit of rage, Julian knocked over a stack of documents on his desk, sending papers fluttering to the floor. Continued rudely to mock Julian's reaction. "Are you so insecure that you need to throw a tantrum?" he jeered. "Is that the true value of your precious possession?" Boiled over. In a sudden, uncontrolled burst of rage, he grabbed the purse from its pedestal and hurled it across the room. The elegant accessory flew through the air, its dark surface catching the light as it landed with a heavy thud against the far wall. The purse's impact sent it rolling behind an antique cabinet, out of sight. Julian's breathing was heavy and ragged, his face flushed with both anger and embarrassment. His guests looked on in shocked silence, their whispers growing louder as the reality of the situation sank in. Julian muttered, his voice trembling as he looked towards the cabinet where the purse had disappeared. He staggered towards it, desperately trying to retrieve it. The cabinet was too heavy to move easily, and the purse was nowhere to be seen. Behind the cabinet, he was unaware that one of the guests, a cunning and opportunistic socialite named Eleanor Ashford, had seized the moment. Seeing Julian's distraction and the purse's new hiding place, Eleanor stealthily maneuvered through the crowd. With a deft hand, she snatched the purse from its precarious resting place. The mix of greed and excitement as she clutched the purse. Her heart raced with the thrill of her daring theft. She slipped the purse into her own handbag, carefully concealing it from view. About to make her exit, the room was pierced by a deep, rumbling voice that emanated from the purse itself. The sound was otherworldly, a dark resonance that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It was a single word, uttered with a chilling authority. Room, the reverberating with a malevolent undertone. Julian froze, his face paling as he turned towards the source of the ominous utterance. The room, once filled with the buzz of hushed conversation, fell into an uneasy silence. He darted around, realizing that the purse had vanished. His frantic search continued, but the purse was now in Eleanor's possession. The air around Julian seemed to thicken with the weight of the purse's dark presence, and the growing tension was palpable. The guests, more intrigued and disconcerted, began to murmur among themselves. The atmosphere of the gathering had shifted from one of admiration to one of scandal and apprehension. Julian's earlier display of power had crumbled, replaced by a chaotic search for the missing purse. Eleanor's opportunity made her swift exit from the study, her heart racing as she slipped away unnoticed. The theft had been executed with cunning precision, and the purse was now firmly in her possession. Agonizing hour as Julian, red-faced and disheveled, continued his frantic search. The purse, having been taken by Eleanor, was completely out of reach. The room, once a stage for Julian's arrogance, now felt like a prison of his own making. Julian was forced to admit defeat. He collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. The purse was gone, and with it, the tangible symbol of his triumph. The night's events had exposed his vulnerability and his inability to control the very object he had sought to dominate. The room was palpable, as the guests whispered and speculated about the missing purse. Julian's earlier confidence was replaced by a gnawing sense of loss and frustration. The purse's absence was a stark reminder of the power it held, and the consequences of Julian's unchecked wrath. Through the window, as casting long shadows across the room, Julian could only reflect on the fleeting nature of his victory, and the dark forces that now seemed to loom over him. The night had brought with it not only the loss of his prized possession, but also a harbinger of the turmoil that awaited. The purse, now in the hands of a new owner, had begun to exert its power in ways that would challenge the very fabric of Julian's world. Chapter 8. The Feast of Excess. The evening after the gala was a blur of intrigue and opulence. Eleanor Ashford, newly in possession of the coveted purse, revelled in her success. She returned to her lavish penthouse, a beacon of luxury and excess, where she planned to celebrate her triumph. The purse, now nestled within the confines of her private world, was a testament to her cunning and ambition. It was a palace of indulgence. Its grand dining hall, adorned with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors, was set for a feast that mirrored her celebratory mood. She had spared no expense in preparing a lavish spread, a display of wealth and extravagance that matched her mood. The table was laden with the finest delicacies, roast meats, exquisite cheeses, and an array of rich pastries, all served with the finest wines. As Eleanor's guests, a carefully selected group of admirers and sycophants, were encouraged to indulge in the feast. The atmosphere was one of excess and revelry, with laughter and conversation flowing freely. Eleanor, dressed in a dazzling gown that matched her mood, floated through the room, her eyes occasionally darting to the purse, which she had placed on a side table as a conversation piece. With Eleanor's gluttony became more pronounced. She sampled every dish with a fervor that bordered on obsession, her appetite insatiable. The purse, a dark and alluring object of fascination, seemed to take on a darker edge amidst the festivity. Its presence was both a symbol of her success and a source of growing unease. And the guests continued to feast. Eleanor's indulgence reached new heights. She grew increasingly animated, her laughter louder and her conversation more animated. The more she ate and drank, the more she became detached from her surroundings, her focus solely on the pleasure of the moment. Her excessive behavior was attracting the attention of an opportunistic servant named Henry, who had long harbored ambitions of his own. Henry had observed the purse from the periphery of the festivities, his eyes glinting with a mixture of greed and calculation. He had witnessed Eleanor's mounting gluttony and saw an opportunity to seize the prize for himself. Indulge, her senses dulled by the excesses of the evening, Henry quietly approached the side table where the purse rested. The room was filled with the sounds of revelry and the clinking of glasses, providing the perfect cover for Henry's discreet theft. He deftly moved the purse into a small satchel he had hidden under his uniform. Smooth and calculated, he slipped the satchel into a corner of the room, intending to retrieve it later when the coast was clear. He kept a close eye on Eleanor, ensuring that her attention remained diverted by the feast and the festivities. As Eleanor's indulgence reached a fever pitch, she was oblivious to Henry's movements, her mind clouded by the effects of her gluttony. She laughed heartily, her face flushed with wine and food, her eyes glazed with the sheer pleasure of excess. As Eleanor, in a final burst of celebration, attempted to gather her guests for one last toast. She reached for the purse, intending to use it as a prop in her toast, but found it missing from the table. Panic set in as she realized the purse was no longer where she had left it. To distress her, she frantically searched the room, her drunken movements stumbling and erratic. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice rising in a mix of panic and anger. Her guests, initially bemused by her sudden change in demeanor, began to share in her anxiety. Search Eleanor's was fruitless. Henry, having slipped away with the satchel, had already exited the penthouse, his theft complete. The purse was now in his possession, hidden within the confines of his own quarters. Continued as to know of and to realize the gravity of her situation. The purse, which had been a symbol of her cunning and success, was now lost due to her own excesses. Her celebration had spiraled into chaos, and the very object she had coveted was now beyond her reach. Search. A deep, rumbling voice resonated through the emptying room. It was a chilling utterance, coming from the purse itself as it changed hands. The word echoed with dark authority, a single malevolent declaration. Glut. Room with an ominous presence, leaving a palpable chill in the air. Eleanor's frantic movements froze as the dark resonance of the purse's voice reverberated through her. The reality of her situation hit her with full force. Her own gluttony had led to the loss of the very object she had coveted. Departing alone, amidst the remnants of her feast, the opulence of the evening had turned into a stark reminder of her own folly. The room, once filled with the sounds of revelry, was now silent, save for the echo of Eleanor's frustration and the distant rumble of the purse's dark influence. A devastating blow to Eleanor, who had prided herself on her ability to control and dominate. Her gluttony had cost her not only the prize, but also her dignity. As she sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands, the weight of her actions settled heavily upon her. Empty penthouse, Eleanor could only reflect on the consequences of her excess. The purse, now in Henry's possession, had become a symbol of the darkness that accompanied unrestrained indulgence. The night had brought not only a loss but also a profound lesson about the price of gluttony and the unpredictable nature of fate. Chapter 8. The Feast of Excess. The evening after the gala was a blur of intrigue and opulence. Eleanor Ashford, newly in possession of the coveted purse, revelled in her success. She returned to her lavish penthouse, a beacon of luxury and excess, where she planned to celebrate her triumph. The purse, now nestled within the confines of her private world, was a testament to her cunning and ambition. Of indulgence. Its grand dining hall, adorned with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors, was set for a feast that mirrored her celebratory mood. She had spared no expense in preparing a lavish spread, a display of wealth and extravagance that matched her mood. The table was laden with the finest delicacies, roast meats, exquisite cheeses, and an array of rich pastries, all served with the finest wines. Eleanor's guests, a carefully selected group of admirers and sycophants, were encouraged to indulge in the feast. The atmosphere was one of excess and revelry, with laughter and conversation flowing freely. Eleanor, dressed in a dazzling gown that matched her mood, floated through the room, her eyes occasionally darting to the purse, which she had placed on a side table as a conversation piece. With Eleanor's gluttony became more pronounced. She sampled every dish with a fervor that bordered on obsession, her appetite insatiable. The purse, a dark and alluring object of fascination, seemed to take on a darker edge amidst the festivity. Its presence was both a symbol of her success and a source of growing unease. The guests continued to feast. Eleanor's indulgence reached new heights. She grew increasingly animated, her laughter louder and her conversation more animated. The more she ate and drank, the more she became detached from her surroundings, her focus solely on the pleasure of the moment. Her excessive was attracting the attention of an opportunistic servant named Henry, who had long harbored ambitions of his own. Henry had observed the purse from the periphery of the festivities, his eyes glinting with a mixture of greed and calculation. He had witnessed Eleanor's mounting gluttony and saw an opportunity to seize the prize for himself. Her senses dulled by the excesses of the evening, Henry quietly approached the side table where the purse rested. The room was filled with the sounds of revelry and the clinking of glasses, providing the perfect cover for Henry's discreet theft. He deftly moved the purse into a small satchel he had hidden under his uniform. Smooth and calculated. He slipped the satchel into a corner of the room, intending to retrieve it later when the coast was clear. He kept a close eye on Eleanor, ensuring that her attention remained diverted by the feast and the festivities. Eleanor's indulgence reached a fever pitch. She was oblivious to Henry's movements, her mind clouded by the effects of her gluttony. She laughed heartily, her face flushed with wine and food, her eyes glazed with the sheer pleasure of excess. Climax, as Eleanor, in a final burst of celebration, attempted to gather her guests for one last toast. She reached for the purse, intending to use it as a prop in her toast, but found it missing from the table. Panic set in as she realized the purse was no longer where she had left it. The distress, as she frantically searched the room, her drunken movements stumbling and erratic. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice rising in a mix of panic and anger. Her guests, initially bemused by her sudden change in demeanor, began to share in her anxiety. Search was fruitless. Henry, having slipped away with the satchel, had already exited the penthouse, his theft complete. The purse was now in his possession, hidden within the confines of his own quarters. Continued to no avail. She began to realize the gravity of her situation. The purse, which had been a symbol of her cunning and success, was now lost due to her own excesses. Her celebration had spiraled into chaos, and the very object she had coveted was now beyond her reach. A deep, rumbling voice resonated through the emptying room. It was a chilling utterance, coming from the purse itself as it changed hands. The word echoed with dark authority, a single malevolent declaration. With an ominous presence, leaving a palpable chill in the air. Eleanor's frantic movements froze as the dark resonance of the purse's voice reverberated through her. The reality of her situation hit her with full force. Her own gluttony had led to the loss of the very object she had coveted. Parted, leaving Eleanor alone amidst the remnants of her feast. The opulence of the evening had turned into a stark reminder of her own folly. The room, once filled with the sounds of revelry, was now silent, save for the echo of Eleanor's frustration and the distant rumble of the purse's dark influence. It was the devastating blow to Eleanor, who had prided herself on her ability to control and dominate. Her gluttony had cost her not only the prize, but also her dignity. As she sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands, the weight of her actions settled heavily upon her. In the empty penthouse, Eleanor could only reflect on the consequences of her excess. The purse, now in Henry's possession, had become a symbol of the darkness that accompanied unrestrained indulgence. The night had brought not only a loss, but also a profound lesson about the price of gluttony and the unpredictable nature of fate. Chapter 9. The temptation of desire. In the dim light of dawn, Henry Williamson sat alone in his modest quarters, his mind still abuzz with the thrill of his recent acquisition. The purse, now safely hidden in the small, unadorned safe beneath his bed, was a symbol of his cleverness and ambition. But, as the days passed, the purse's dark influence began to manifest in unexpected ways. Henry gave way to a growing obsession. His thoughts, once consumed by dreams of wealth and power, began to focus on something else entirely: a woman named Eliza Hawthorne. Eliza was a striking figure, known for her charm and grace, a rising star in the world of high society. Henry had long admired her from afar, captivated by her beauty and allure. His admiration, however, had recently turned into an all-consuming desire. Upscale establishments Henry could only dream of entering, and though he knew her to be out of reach, his lustful thoughts grew more intense each day. He began to frequent the same high society venues she attended, using his newfound wealth to blend in and catch her eye. His efforts were met with little success, but he remained determined. Exclusive cocktail party hosted at the opulent estate of a wealthy patron, Henry finally saw his chance. The party was a dazzling display of wealth and sophistication, and Eliza, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald green, was the evening's center of attention. Henry's eyes followed her with a mix of desire and desperation as he moved through the crowd. Henry's resolve to win Eliza's favor became more apparent. He found himself increasingly agitated, his attempts to engage her in conversation becoming more insistent. Eliza, initially polite but increasingly wary, seemed to sense Henry's intentions. Despite her attempts to deflect his advances, Henry was relentless. Reached the peak when, in a moment of misplaced confidence, Henry invited Eliza to his private quarters under the pretense of showing her a unique artifact he had recently acquired. His heart raced as he thought of the purse, believing it could be a key to impressing her with its allure. But was intrigued by the promise of something mysterious. She agreed to accompany Henry, her curiosity piqued. As they entered Henry's modest apartment, he gestured towards the small, elegant safe where the purse was hidden. He unlocked it with trembling hands, revealing the purse to Eliza. Splendid, with its dark elegance, seemed to catch the light in a way that made it irresistible. Eliza's eyes widened as she took in its beauty. Henry, driven by a blend of desperation and hope, tried to entice her with its allure, extolling its virtues and hinting at its magical properties. Charmed by the purse's appearance, and intrigued by Henry's enthusiasm, reached out to touch it. Henry's heart leapt with hope, but as she handled the purse, he could not shake the feeling that something was slipping from his grasp. As her gaze became increasingly absorbed by it, Henry, caught up in his lustful desires, began to imagine a future where Eliza, enchanted by the purse, would reciprocate his affections. His thoughts were a chaotic swirl of desire and desperation. The purse seemed to come alive with a dark, rumbling energy. Eliza, seemingly enthralled, found herself unable to resist its allure. Henry's desperation had unwittingly catalyzed the purse's influence, and as Eliza's fascination grew, the purse's dark power began to assert itself. Imperceptible shift with the purse slipped from Henry's grasp and fell into Eliza's hands. The transformation was immediate. As soon as Eliza held the purse, a deep, rumbling voice emanated from it. The word, spoken with an undeniable authority, echoed through the room. With a chilling authority, and Eliza's eyes widened as the reality of her desire became clear. The purse, now firmly in her possession, seemed to pulse with a dark energy that both enthralled and frightened her. Her earlier curiosity turned to a deeper, more unsettling fascination. As Eliza's expression shifted from intrigue to a mix of terror and realization. His earlier hopes were shattered as he saw the purse slip through his fingers, now a symbol of his own misguided desires. He had underestimated the purse's power, and in his lustful pursuit, had unwittingly lost the very object he had coveted. The purse. Eliza felt an unsettling mix of empowerment and dread. The darkness of the purse's influence began to seep into her consciousness, reshaping her desires and ambitions in ways she had not anticipated. The party continued outside, unaware of the dark transformation taking place within Henry's apartment. Clutching the purse close, Henry was left alone, his dreams of wealth and desire shattered. The purse had once again changed hands, and its influence had moved on to its new owner. Henry's lustful ambition had given way to a deeper realization of the purse's dark power, leaving him with only the bitter taste of his own folly. With the echo of the purse's last word, a reminder of the consequences of unchecked desire and the pervasive influence of the dark artifact. Eliza, now under its spell, would soon face the consequences of her own lust, and Henry was left to reflect on the cost of his actions.